Hello and welcome to Business Today. I'm Siddharth Zarabi and continuing our coverage with the budget makers of Budget 25-26, Sanjay Kumar Agarwal, Chairman CBIC, and Ravi Agarwal, Chairman of the Cbdt with me. And very clearly, both have had an action-packed day. But let me first come to you, Mr. Agarwal, on the direct tax side changes. And one of the questions that is being asked is this a slow and silent burial of the old tax regime, and when will it be formally announced?
So, as on date, both the tax regimes stand, and the option is with the taxpayer. Whatever is the person feels beneficial, the person opts. Of course, yes, we have given benefits to the new tax regime, because ultimately, if we want the tax regime to be simple, how do we do it? So, in the old tax regime, there are certain deductions, there are certain exemptions, which is open to interpretations. That makes the calculation difficult, more complex. So, to do away with that, a straight computation of income tax is available in the new tax regime with reduced rates. So, taken together, this becomes acceptable to the people, and which is reflected from the fact that about 74% of the people have already adopted the new tax regime. I am sure that with this change that has been brought out in this amendment in this finance bill, more people would be prompted.
How many more, sir? It's currently 75% roughly.
Yes.
What level of adoption do you expect of the new tax regime?
Well, as I see, we have about 8.5 crore individual taxpayers, and out of that 75% are already and they have opted. So, going forward, I see that the figure should touch somewhere around 95-97%.
Okay. I'll come back to you on that. I want to turn our attention to the customs part of it. In terms of the broader debate, Mr. Agarwal, the question that I want to ask you is that with today's changes in import duty, and it's a continuation of previous measures also, if someone were to ask you, is India being less protectionist from a customs tariff point of view, what would you tell them?
I would like to mention that last budget, July budget, FM has announced that customs duty rate rationalization exercise will be done. And this exercise has been conducted at a massive scale, and we have gone through all the tariff items and looked into the rate structure. So, with 4 objectives, we have conducted this exercise. One is that adequate protection is provided in certain sectors, then rate structure is simplified. Thirdly, that industry remain competitive, and the fourth is ease of doing business. With that objective in mind, 7 rates have been eliminated, which were very high rates like 25%, 35%, 40%, 100%, 125% and 150% on industrial goods. We have kept out the agriculture goods and textiles from this exercise, and the rates which have been retained from 0, 2.5, 5, 7.5 and 10. The rates are applied in a graded manner on distinct stage of value addition. So, the raw materials or ores or minerals, they have been kept at the rate of 0 or 2.5%. When these are processed to some extent or intermediates emerge, so on those items we have kept the rate at 5 or 7.5%. On capital goods, the rate has been kept at 7.5%, and on finished goods at 10%. The rates which are otherwise retained are 15 and 20%. These are not the main rates. Main rates are these 5 rates. And these 2 rates have been retained where the goods have been of the nature of which are covered under PLI or PMP schemes, or the surge was noticed. So, for short duration, to protect the Indian industry, such higher rates have been kept. The rates which were higher than 20% have been brought down to 20%. Rates which were higher than 70% were brought down to 70%. But to provide the effective protection to the industry, equivalent AIDC has been imposed on most of the items, but on certain items, AIDC, which is Agriculture and Infrastructure Development Cess, so that has been imposed at a lower rate. So effectively on certain items, rates have come down, especially say goods which are falling in tariff rate slab of 30%. On baggage, say for example, the rate has come down from 38.5%, that was 35% plus SWS of 10%, has come down to 35%.
One of the things that caused a ripple of excitement was the fact that motorcycle customs rates have been reduced, but then this point about the cess, the AIDC came up, and people were saying that India has changed its customs tariffs to account for US criticism and Harley Davidson. What would you say to them?
India, in this exercise, the average customs rate, which earlier used to be 11.65%, has now come down to 10.66%. So it's a reduction of almost 10% in average rate.
Correct.
And now this rate is more akin to the rates which are there in ASEAN countries. So definitely this exercise has resulted in lower average customs duty rates. As far as you have referred to the motorcycles, I would say that basically the rates have been reduced in this rate rationalization exercise. So rates have been reduced. Earlier it used to be 50% plus 5%, 10% SWs on that. Effectively it was 55% on completely built motorcycles. But if the motorcycles are brought in CKD conditions, rate was 15% earlier also. So in this exercise, the rate has been reduced from 50% to 40%.
Okay. Is there unfair criticism of India being protectionist, especially after this? We have heard some commentary in the United States. Are we being unfairly targeted? Because many countries have certain measures to support domestic interests.
I would say that we have analyzed the 30 top imports from USA. And all such items, because the items which are mainly imported from USA are like crude petroleum oil or natural diamonds or similar nature goods. So there the rates are very low. Either it is 0 or these rates are between 0 to 10%. In none of the cases, rates are about 10%.
Right. Let me turn to you, Mr. Ravi Agarwal, and this is a question that is related to what we see in terms of the new income tax bill. What is the philosophy behind it and what can we expect? Because the finance minister has announced that it's going to be out in a week's time. Can you provide us an early glimpse of its content?
If you recall, in July 24, the Honorable Prime Minister, Finance Minister had mentioned that we would be working on simplifying the Income Tax Act 61, and since then we have worked on that since 6 months, and we are happy to say that yes, ultimately we have been able to come out with the draft bill which would be presented to the Parliament. Now the basic philosophy was that we make it simple, easy to read, easy to comprehend. The presentation should be good so that it is easy for the normal taxpayer to understand the provisions, and therefore that since the language would be simple, the scope for litigation would also go down. So that would promote that would prompt ease of doing business, reduce litigation, bring more clarity, and therefore better compliance. So this is the thought behind it. And we have worked on this thing, and as the Honorable Finance Minister mentioned today, we have been able to reduce the whole act by around about 50%. And we have been able to cut the redundancies that had crept in over a period of time. Then of course the language has been made simpler. Whatever was some duplications were there, some redundant sections were there, some outdated provisions were there. Those have been kept out. In the process, if there were certain gaps, we found that there were certain gaps. Those have also been plugged. So this is the overall philosophy.
I have one more follow-up on this, and this really has to do with the point about trust first and scrutinize later.
Yes.
You know, one interacts with many taxpayers, especially those on the corporate side, and there is criticism that sometimes the assessing officers are, hardball people unnecessarily, despite their best intentions. Will this statement actually lead to a change on the ground?
Let us see it in the context of how many taxpayers we have, and ultimately the number of returns, the number of cases that we are actually accepting as it is without questioning. We have about 8.75 crore taxpayers.
Right.
And 99.5% cases, we are accepting the returns as has been declared by the taxpayers. So this is the trust that one is.
So that's a very small number that is left.
That is, yes, that is left. And then even that small number, it is not a random sort of a questioning. There is an entire data analytics that takes place.
And that
a risk
throws up
assessment
certain things.
That throws up certain things, some red flags. And based on that, a call is taken whether to issue notices and all. In this direction, in this bill itself, we have come up with the concept of, we have in fact extended the date of updated returns. Now, what is the philosophy behind it? You see, we had introduced this concept of updated returns for 2 years. That is, if you have missed updating your return, and after 1 year, if you want to update it, you can go ahead. In 2 years, you want to update it, you can do it. This has been extended to 3rd year and the 4th year. The philosophy is that why should we question the taxpayer? Let's inform the taxpayer in case we get certain information. Subsequently, suppose 1 year down the line, you get the information, you show it in the AIS, and the taxpayer wants to comply. There is no need for asking a question. Let the taxpayer actually comply without questioning. So that is also one, attempt towards trust first.
Okay. There are many more questions, viewers, that have to be asked to both the CBIC chairman and the Cbdt chairman, but we hope to get them on the 4th of February. As I've been announcing, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will be at the India Today, Budget Today, post-budget conclave on the 4th of February here in Delhi. You will be able to see it live on all our platforms, and that's where we will take some more of these questions, including whether there is a surgical strike on savings, and if the Cbdt has delivered, should the CBIC now push for some delivery on GST? But those are questions outside the budget. We'll come back. I'm going to thank both my guests here for their time with us today, and you, the viewer. With that, we are wrapping up our coverage with the budget makers. We'll continue with other interesting highlights of the Union Budget. Do stay tuned into Business Today. I am Siddharth Zarabi, and we are starting the Secretaries Roundtable after the presentation of the Union Budget. And with me now, Dr. V. Anantha Nageshwaran, the Chief Economic Advisor, and Mr. Manoj Goel, the Secretary of the Department of Expenditure. Dr. Nageshwaran, I want to start